The claims from the South African government and the mainstream media after statements and the executive order by Donald Trump were unanimous that no expropriation of land without compensation has taken place in South Africa. Not yet in any case. But under the previous expropriation bill, even with compensation, expropriations were in most cases highly unreasonable to the landowners, where these landowners walked away unhappy with compensation far below the value of their property. In our previous video, we discussed the overwhelming failure of black beneficiaries of these land expropriations. The government already showed their intention with the expropriation bill before the bill was even passed in 2025. In 2018, the owners of a 3,000-hectare game farm were ordered to vacate the farm as it was to be expropriated. Good day, dear friends. Willem Petzer speaking. Subscribe for more content like this in your interest, and be sure to join our WhatsApp group for all the information on the work the Willem Petzer group is doing by simply sending your name and surname to the WhatsApp number on the screen. On the 23rd of January, the South African president signed a new expropriation bill into law, allowing for the government to expropriate private property at no compensation. This move has drawn international attention, especially from the new Trump administration, with several senior members of the US government recently expressing their concern about the state of property rights and minority rights in South Africa. So, what exactly is the current status of land expropriation in South Africa, and what is the agenda behind the government's latest expropriation bill? I believe the first attempt by the ANC government to expropriate farmland from white farmers back in 2018 with so little compensation that it can be seen as no compensation can provide some background information and context to the political developments that we are seeing unfold right now. On the 29th of March 2018, the then Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform, Maite Nkoana Mashabane, served Johan Steenkamp and his brother-in-law Arnold Kloete, the owners of the Akkerland farm near Messina in Limpopo, with an eviction order. The owners were given just 7 days to vacate their 3,000-hectare property, as the government informed the owners that they were expropriating the land. They were informed that on the 5th of April, government officials would come to inspect the terrain, whereupon the owners would, and I quote, hand over the farm's keys to the state. Of course, the week they were given to vacate the farm just happened to fall over Easter weekend, which of course meant 2 extra public holidays, and made it exceptionally difficult for the owners to find a judge to hear an urgent application to file a case against this order. To understand the background, the government move to expropriate Akkerland farm from its white owners, we need to examine developments dating back to 2012. In July 2012, 2 mining companies, Coal African Limited and Regulus Investment Holdings, filed a case against Akkerland for not allowing them to access the property to conduct prospecting operations on the land. Akkerland in response contended that the mineral exploitation activities should fall under the relevant provisions requiring municipal consent. They argued that the land use table of its scheme itself did not explicitly allow for mining or prospecting without such consent, and therefore the companies needed to obtain additional approval from the local municipality to proceed with operations. In 2014, however, the court ruled that the mining companies should be granted access to the property to conduct said operations. This ruling was based on the MPRDA, or Mineral and Petroleum Resource Development Act, which the court ruled supported their legal right to prospect. The stage was now set for the government's expropriation of that property for 10% of market value in 2018. The farm was valued at $12 million, but the government offered less than $1.2 million for the expropriation. After all, it is precisely in this area where at the time the Chinese government initiated plans to build a brand new industrial city in what is known as the Messina-Makado Special Economic Zone. Given that the farms form parts of the region's valuable coal belt, the working assumption is that the government actually sought to expropriate the land for the purpose of mining coal for the 4,600 megawatt coal-fired power plant which was supposed to be an integral part of this $10 billion investment project by the Chinese government. In other words, the government seemed to expropriate this farm for the benefit of the Chinese government under the guise of land reform. This is exacerbated by the fact that the land claim on this farm was later proven to be false. Significantly, only a few months prior to the eviction order was handed to Steenkamp and Klute in December 2017, the ANC leadership passed a policy resolution to proceed with amending the South African Constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation. At the time, a government list of 196 properties that the ANC was earmarking for expropriation without compensation was leaked to the public. And at the very top of the list were none other than the two properties that constitute Akkerland Farm, Salaita and Lucan. But what was particularly striking about the list is that the vast majority of the farms listed on it had mineral rights, which, of course, is no coincidence. The list makes it absolutely crystal clear what this attempted expropriation was all about. It's not about historical claims to the land in South Africa at all, but it has everything to do with the government's economic investments in mining companies and other shady deals with the Chinese government. But the story of the Akkerland farm gets even more interesting. By the time the owners were served with the eviction notice from the government, there was already two different land claims from two so-called black communities on the same land, with each of them contesting the other's claim to the property. And one of these communities, the Kuvule community, actually at the time also opposed the government's move to expropriate the land from Steenkamp and Klute. Now, prior to the eviction order, the government offered to expropriate Akkerland Farm at no more than 10% of its market price, a price that nobody in their right mind would ever sell for, of course. Yet, despite the government doing everything they possibly could to try and prevent the owners of Akkerland Farm from disputing the eviction order in court, the owners, with the help of the farming community and several agricultural organizations, managed to take all the necessary legal steps to oppose the eviction order and continue farming. Thankfully, on this occasion they were successful as the Land Claims Court ruled in their favor in September 2018. During the proceedings, the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform conceded it had not followed the correct procedures to expropriate the farm. The courts ultimately reversed the expropriation, citing procedural errors by the department, in particular the failure to allow Akkerland Boerdery the opportunity to challenge the claim in court before issuing the final expropriation notice. The court then ordered the minister to withdraw the notice of expropriation, return the title deed to the owners and cover all the legal expenses. Again, proving in court the South African government's intent to trample on property rights by offering 10% of fair market value within expropriations. The question must be asked, what will the government do with power given to them by the new Expropriation Act, which gives them the ability to expropriate with nil or zero compensation? Of course, despite the court's ruling in favor of the landowners, the government's attempt to illegally expropriate property already back then set a concerning precedent, which in itself undermines the very security that private property rights is supposed to protect and enshrine. The psychological intimidation effect of such actions can never be underestimated. It leads to increased uncertainty among property owners and on top of that adversely affects economic stability. In fact, in January 2019, only a couple of months after their court case, the owners of Akkerland Farm announced that they were selling the land to Boabab Mining and Exploration Company. While this transaction was indeed conducted on the willing seller, willing buyer principle, the pressure exerted upon the owners through the government intimidation, multiple land claims and court cases undoubtedly played a vital part in their decision to move on to other ventures. It is also important to note that they sold this farm at about half its fair market value. Still, at the time, this court ruling had constituted a major victory for the family, for the farmers in particular, but also for every property owner in South Africa. Furthermore, this was later followed up by yet another victory when the ANC's attempt to amend the constitution to expropriate land without compensation failed in Parliament in late 2021. At the time, this failure to change the constitution proved a devastating blow to the communist agenda of the ANC and managed to slow down their momentum, but only somewhat.
That a number of parties that had opposed each other, but that represent the majority of South African voters, have decided to work together to deliver this result has given a new birth, a new era to our country. I do sincerely believe that this is an era of hope, and it's also an era of inclusivity.
However, they are now once again trying to revive this exact same agenda by taking new steps to try and expropriate land from private property owners in South Africa. The recently passed expropriation bill signed into law by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on the 23rd of January 2025 serves as a prime example of this. With international pressure piling up on Ramaphosa, the presidency released a statement on the 3rd of February in which it claimed that the ANC government has always been firmly committed to, and I quote, balance the need for public usage of land and the protection of rights of the property owner. The story of the Akkerland farm and the way that the ANC government went about trying to illegally steal the land, as well as their failed attempts to change the constitution to allow for property expropriation without compensation, unquestionably shows us that the president is lying and that this bill forms part of the communist agenda the ANC has always adhered to. It is no secret that the ANC's program for this country, commonly known as the National Democratic Revolution, envisions the transformation of South Africa into a completely socialist society where the state takes control of all property and the means of production. This is no new idea originating from some kind of imagined radicalization of the ruling party in this country. This has always been their agenda on paper. This has always been part of their platform. That the Marxist government of South Africa wants to confiscate private property of the white citizens of this country is no secret, and Ramaphosa's attempt at denying this by means of doing semantic gymnastics now that the world is finally starting to recognize what is happening in South Africa is nothing short of bizarre. In light of the case of the Akkerland farm, there is only one rational interpretation of the current motives by the South African government to expropriate private property. It can and must be seen as an outright assault not only on the fundamental principle of property rights, but in particular upon the Afrikaner people and our rights to the land of our ancestors. The kind of uncertainty about their basic property rights that Johan Steenkamp and Arnold Kloete were faced with in 2018 is now being exerted upon an entire people group by the government. Expropriating land without compensation not only undermines property rights, but it also sends a chilling message to investors, both locally and internationally, about the safety of doing business in South Africa. This creates an environment of instability where trust in the legal system and government is eroded. The actions of the ANC masked as so-called efforts to address so-called historical injustices are in fact sowing increased division, insecurity and resentment. What this particular case from 2018 also shows is that the ANC has no interest in actually redistributing land to black citizens of this country. Land expropriation is just a cover under the veil of social justice to advance the interest of a small elite and their international connections to other criminal organizations such as the Chinese Communist Party. Rather than fostering economic progress or sustainable growth, these policies only serve to deepen the divide, enriching a select few while impoverishing the nation as a whole. Despite what Cyril Ramaphosa claims, this government has absolutely no interest in justice or equity. It simply seeks to plunder and to destroy. It is also very important to note that the new Expropriation Act does not discern between different kinds of property. Property can mean any property, not just immovable property. So by this ideology and by this law, the ANC can, legally speaking, expropriate any property in this country from anyone. We shall continue to bring analysis of topics in your interest, so be sure to subscribe and be sure to join our WhatsApp group, name and surname to the Willem Petzer Group WhatsApp number on the screen. Goodbye and God bless.